Boy, forgive me for being so personal here, and you don't have to answer, but I am curious, why did you give up writing?
That's a fair question. So I had a really unhealthy relationship with writing. I grew up loving stories, movies and TV, loved storytelling. But as a young adult and an adult, I had a pretty unhealthy relationship with money. I didn't come from money. My parents had cut me off. So I was like really on my own without a safety net. And so I was always scared of running out of money or not, being able to pay the rent or food and everything. And suddenly, at a very young age, I get this career and I'm being paid more money than I ever thought I'd ever make. But I have this like constant fear that each project I do isn't going to be good enough and I'm going to lose my career and I'm going to run out of money and so I wrote primarily from fear. First of all, I would procrastinate like crazy. I could teach expert classes in procrastination. I was good at it. And at some point, the deadline's coming and it's like, well, if I don't get this done, I have to give back, because they give you half the money up front and they give you half the money when you turn it in. I'm gonna have to give back this money that I've been spending, but then no one will ever hire me again, right? So I gotta do this. But it was almost like I had a gun to my head and I could get it done and turn it in, and it was strong enough that they'd hire me for something else or someone else would hire me. But it was just, most of the time when I was writing, it was just fear that it wasn't good enough. And I had a very active internal judge who would look over my shoulder and go, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough. And it was exhausting, and I developed bad habits to cope. I became very overweight. I became very angry. I lost friends. And along the way, I was always teaching because UCLA asked me to teach, but writing was how I made my money, and teaching was something I would do 1 or 2 classes a year to try to give back, and also because it was fun. After like writing with all this fear, I really liked teaching. And then my dad died, and I think for a lot of people, it's first time your parent dies. At least for me, it's like, oh, I don't live forever, because my dad was like Superman. He was a Marine and he got cancer and he went pretty fast. And so it's like, it was the first time I really started thinking about, mortality and living my life. And I just realized that the gift of writing for me was, it was a place to try to work on the worst parts of myself, fear, reactivity, insecurity, perfectionism, anger. But teaching, the gift of teaching it allowed me to be the best version of me. There's something about teaching that calmed me down, made me much more empathetic and loving, and just, I could feel it and people could feel it around me. Like when I was teaching, that was the best version of me. However good that was, it was the best version of me. And often as a writer, it was like the worst version of me. So when my dad died, I was like, why am I continuing to write? And, I try to be really honest, and it's like money and ego, because I've always been very insecure. Growing up, I always felt like everyone else was cooler and better than me. I was always like an outsider. And so the fact that I accomplished something that a lot of people want to do but can't made me feel special. And, it was like, it's embarrassing to say this, but I would like be thinking about, this kid that like terrorized me in high school. He's going to see this movie and he's going to see the credits. He's going to see that I wrote it and he's going to feel terrible. He's going to feel like a loser and that I'm so, of course, A, he's probably not seeing the movie. B, he's probably not reading the credits. And C, he probably doesn't remember me at all, right? But it was like, it was ego. I was really good at going to parties and act very modest, like, oh, I don't want to talk about these big people I'm working, or I'm working on a movie with Harrison Ford or Julia Roberts. But I would answer people's questions in a way that they would keep asking me that would force me to reveal this. My wife would always like get mad at me. She's like, you like, it's so obvious. You wanted them to ask you this question so that you could modestly answer this way. And I'm like, no, maybe, yes, okay. And so at that point, I'm like, I don't know, I just sort of maybe I was in enough pain and I was unhappy enough that I'm like, I don't care about the ego anymore. And yeah, money still mattered, but I was fortunate that I had been writing professionally for almost 11 years. I had a lot of money. And I decided I'd rather make less money as a teacher and just be a better person and a better life. And like, once I just gave up writing and started teaching full time, like everyone, like, 6 months later, they're like, oh my God, you're like, it's a different you. I was relaxed. I was more patient. I wasn't angry at everyone. I wasn't blaming everyone for things. I used to, when something bad happened, I always had to blame someone. And I like listened better. I connected better. And so I decided at that point, I'm just going to teach and not write. And I also learned that I love storytelling, and I still told stories, just I wasn't pitching projects. As a teacher, I tell stories and other ways. And I also learned, because as a teacher, pretty quickly, because some of my early students had success and started selling things and started to make a name for themselves, a lot of people wanted to come work with me. And over time, I had like a whole generation of writers I had trained who had success, and they would hire me and I would work with them on their projects. Not as a named partner, but as like a private consultant, whatever you want to call it. And so that was really satisfying, helping them with their pitches and stories. So I still got to do a lot of the story work, but without this fear of rejection, And like, if someone hires me and I'm working with them, I'm there to support them. I'm there to support their vision to make the strongest version. They go and they're successful, they get all the credit. I don't take any of the credit. My name's not on it. If they go and fall flat on their face, that's them, So I got to do a lot of the fun stuff. Yeah. And now when I go to parties, instead of wanting everyone to know how special I am, I'm just really curious to find out who they are and what's special about them. And just, so to me, I kind of think teaching saved my life, because when I walked away from writing, I was really overweight. I had some health issues. I was really angry. And, I knew it wasn't going to end well for me. And the other thing I also will say candidly is, because people will say, wow, that must have taken a lot of courage. Not really. I mean, two things. First off, I wasn't at the top of my writing game. There was a time for many years where I'd be writing something and people would be coming to me, hire me, and I always was being hired, and I was writing nonstop, and I was very much in demand. By this time, 10, 11 years in, that was not happening. I had to fight for jobs. I was good at it. I was always good at pitching. I was getting jobs, but it was getting harder and harder. So, it wasn't like I was top of my game and everyone was trying to hire me. And I said, no, I'm walking away. I was fighting harder and harder for jobs that I didn't want that much. So that probably made it easier. And also I don't know, I just woke up one night with, it's crazy, but like I guess it was a premonition, but it was like, I didn't feel like a premonition. I felt like I woke up and like I knew that if I stayed on this path, I was going to not be alive for much longer. I just knew it. So that made it pretty easy, to walk away from this. And when I walked away, it wasn't like permanent. I'm like, I'm gonna just take a year off and teach and kind of renew, and I'll come back. But no, I mean, after that year, I'm like, why would I go back? It was sort of like I survived this war, and I think, I know some people will like when they find this out, they're like, but that's weird because you teach the opposite. You teach like how to have a healthy relationship to writing, and like everything you're saying is the opposite of what you teach. Like, how do you teach it? I'm like, that's why I teach it, because I spent 10 years fighting against these demons and I lost. I couldn't overcome this. So I'm really good at working with someone and pinpointing what's wrong with their process and what's holding them back in a way they don't even know it. And what can they do to overcome it? Because what I realized later on is that as a teacher, one thing I did that was different from anyone I know is I focused on process over product. And I was always like, let's fix your process. Either your process controls you or you control your process, because my process, my insecurity, my fear controlled me. I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, it's so clear to me. The reason I was teaching more and more, and the reason I was obsessively thinking about it, and the reason that I was talking to everyone and just always thinking about process and working with writers passionately to heal their process, to fix their process, to improve their process, is I was trying to do it for myself. I think on some level, I thought if I can figure out how to do it for you, then I could figure out how to do it for me. I didn't know that at the time, but I do think that we often teach what we need to learn. And so I think that's why I was, so obsessed by that. I actually think my struggle against all of these issues forged my teaching ability. And I would not be the teacher I am, if not for that. So I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for, I had some great experiences. I met great people, and it was really fun to be able to write big summer movies. And I mean, I was I'm always was aware that I was very fortunate to have the career that I had. I never took that for granted. But I also felt ashamed of myself because, like, I'm not enjoying this. I hate it. I complain about it to my wife or my friends. Not complaining that I kept getting hired to write movies, but complaining about how miserable I was writing movies, until one of my friends who was trying to be a writer said, I don't want to hear that. Like, I'm just trying to sell a script, and I really don't want to hear how you're suffering to write this script that you're getting paid this amount of money for. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. If I were you, that would be really annoying. Thank you. So I stopped. But anyway, I always felt like, I should be enjoying this. But it was just really hard for me because I had a really unhealthy relationship with my creativity and writing. It was all about money. It was all about outcome. It was all fear-based. And I was really good at convincing myself what I wrote was terrible. So it's part of why I'm so motivated to teach writers early on a healthy process. So, because I'm not really interested in helping someone get a career. I'm interested in helping someone have a career and to be able to write what only they could write and to share that with the world.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.